properly in practice.
SNP spokesperson Kirsten Oswald.
Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for an advanced sight of her statement, although I would have welcomed a good deal more detail. I do have to say, whether it is the UK Government being missing in action on its own commitments to ban conversion therapy 5 years on, or now this, they do seem much more interested in culture wars than in looking after the rights of some of the most vulnerable. And of course, this is the same UK Government intent on blocking the democratic will, the cross-party expressed democratic will of the Scottish Parliament, again more interested in constitutional shenanigans than human rights. I wonder if she can tell me, she talked about unintended consequences, has she undertaken an impact assessment of how this change will affect the safety, the health and the well-being of those affected? Can she say what conversations specifically she has had with international counterparts and what specific evidence she received ahead of this change that made her decide to remove these named territories? Can she outline exactly what will happen to those already living here and living under their new gender who come from the places she's now removing from the list? And can she say where this now leaves the notion of reciprocal arrangements? What of those from the UK living elsewhere? Does she recognise that the UK is travelling rapidly backwards on the rights of LGBT people and that this decision is very much out of step with other progressive countries around the world? What consideration has she given to the UK's international reputation? From sending vulnerable refugees to Rwanda, from placing barriers in front of care workers who want to come into the UK, and now this, the dearth of compassion at the heart of the UK Government is writ large. And of course, we've all heard the reports that the Conservative Party intends to fight the general election on the trans debate and culture wars. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody's identity should be in question. As she herself said, nobody's identity should be used as a political football. We need to stop that. She needs to reflect and she needs to change tack.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I completely disagree with the Honourable Lady. She talks about us using this issue as culture wars football, yet the Labour opposition say this is the first time they've heard us say anything about it in the House. Surely both cannot be true. I think it is extraordinary. I think it is extraordinary that she is telling us that we are not compassionate. It is her government in Scotland that was allowing rapists to be housed in women's prisons while using self-ID as a cover. So I will not accept that. We are the ones who are thinking about women's rights. We are the ones who are thinking about safeguarding. We are the ones who are thinking about vulnerability. She asks me about reciprocal arrangements. The fact is that our system is a lot more rigorous, so there is no reason for others to stop accepting our certificates because they have not changed. It is because other countries have changed their process that we are updating this. We cannot be in a situation where we have rules for people in this country and we allow people from other countries with different rules to be able to access things that people in the UK cannot access. This is about equality before the law. This is about parity. So reciprocal arrangements will be fine. She asks about people already living here. This is not retrospective legislation, so it's not going to impact people who are already here. We're just making it clear. Self-ID is not something that this government supports. We do not believe that this is something that people should just declare because it creates the very same problems which she saw in Scotland at the Isla Bryson case of rapists going into women's prisons. We are not going to allow that to happen on this government's watch.
Jackie Doyle-Price.
Madam Deputy Speaker, of course you cannot change biological sex, and the GRC establishes legal sex for the purpose of exercising certain rights. Now, given that we've had a massive shift in rights since the Act was passed in 2004, particularly same-sex marriage, could my right honourable friend advise me exactly what additional rights are granted through the giving of a GRC?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. This is one of the areas where we're trying to provide clarity. Because of the Haldane judgment, there is now confusion between biological sex and legal sex, and certainly in terms of the interpretation which people put on it. So a gender recognition certificate certainly had different standards in terms of what you could obtain until this judgment. We want to make clear, for instance, that single-sex spaces are still going to be protected. We're going to be doing a lot more in order to clarify that. The Haldane judgment changes that. And that is one of the reasons why we need to look very carefully. There were 30 pages in the report, in the appeal court report, shows how complex this issue is. The law is no longer clear. In fact, I would go so far as to say the law is now a mess because of changing times. We need to provide clarity. We cannot assume that the wording as was intended in 2004 or 2010 still works in 2023. And we are carrying out work in order to fix that.
Just to confirm, I will only be taking those who were here at the start of the statement. They will know if they weren't, so I expect that they won't stand. Sir Ben Bradshaw.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, not wishing to be upstaged by the ex-Home Secretary, the Minister whose job it is to defend vulnerable minorities chooses to make her first statement this year in this House to announce 2 measures attacking transgender people. Why does she think that the UK, which was first for 4 years up until 2015 in the European League of LGBT rights, has now fallen to 17th under her watch?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I completely reject the honourable gentleman's assertion. I have come to the floor of the House for an SI, which is actually unusual for a Secretary of State, because I think it is important that members across the House have an opportunity to ask questions. I am not afraid of anybody on the opposite benches. I'm not afraid of a single one of them, because I know that they do not take this seriously. The honourable gentleman asks why, or the right honourable gentleman, I should say, asks why is it that we have fallen? It is because self-ID is something that we differ with in opinion with other countries. It's a fact. We are different, but just because other countries believe that self-ID is the way doesn't mean that we in the UK have to do what everybody else is doing.
Ian O'Brien.
The issues of gender recognition and self-ID that my right honourable friend is working to clarify are increasingly an issue in amateur and professional sport, where the risk of serious injury to women and girls, and also examples of unfairness. Does my right honourable friend agree that in general for most sports it is safer and fairer to separate on the basis of biological sex?
I do agree. Certainly in the majority of physical sports, it is fairer and safer to separate on the basis of biological sex. And it is crucial that sporting bodies understand their responsibilities to women. A poor understanding of equalities law has it's led to women like the pool player Lynn Pinchers having to take legal action to ensure fair competition in their sport. Girls often fear being physically injured by biological males and enduring rather than speaking up about the abuse because they are scared of being called bigots. And this is what I would say to people across the House, that calling people transphobic and calling them bigots when they express concerns is creating a chilling effect. I had a group of school children, teenage girls, who I had in my office who told me about how because of mixed-sex sports, they are bullied and pushed around, that one of them talked about her glasses being broken because the boys are using the opportunity to bully. We should think about children. We should think about protecting them. So I disagree with the labelling of anybody who has a different opinion as transphobic. That is what is causing the problems in this debate, and I am determined to bring some light rather than the heat which they continue to generate.
Christine Jardine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say that I actually agree with the Secretary of State. Labels of any sort of people in any part of this debate are unacceptable, and we shouldn't indulge it. The Secretary of State also said that this is an important decision. I agree with that also. It's an important statement. She also said it had to be evidence-based. I completely agree with that. So could she perhaps tell us which organisations in this country concerned with LGBT rights and with human rights generally she consulted in this statement, and what their response and recommendations were?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. She is right. We did carry out extensive consultations, but remember, this is something which we do repeatedly and periodically. The fact that we have not carried this out since 2011 shows that we have been remiss in our duties, and that is something that I am fixing. And one of the issues that we have is that a lot of people do not understand the law where it comes to self-identification. We are providing clarity there. We have engaged with numerous LGBT groups, but the fact of the matter is that many of them support self-ID. That is not this government's policy. Stonewall does not decide the law in this country. whatever it is that people want to campaign on, we will listen and we will hear. But we have been very clear about this. We have been very clear about this. And this is something that we are not budging on, and we are updating the law in accordance with government policy, and we will continue to do so.
Miriam Cates.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement, which provides some much-needed clarity, because self-ID does threaten the dignity and the safety of women and girls, and she's absolutely right that the UK should not recognise GRCs from countries that operate policies of self-ID. Yeah. Sex matters in life and in law, and it's right that the UK has our own rigorous processes to gain GRCs, but these safeguards don't apply to the process of changing sex markers on passports and driving licences, which are of course far more commonly used for identification in everyday life. So will my right honourable friend look again at the Passport Office's 2021 review and decide whether or not we can stop this self-ID by the back door through driving licences and passports?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and it is a good one. It is one of the things that came to light as we looked at government policy across the board, and it is an example of how the law needs updating. The reason why we have that is not because the government supported self-ID, but it was because before the same-sex marriage law came into being, we wanted people to be able to change their legal documents so that they could get married. Now that we have a law that has fixed that, we should look again at some of the measures which we brought into place earlier on, which are no longer needed. And that is one of the reasons why I think she's right to raise that. It is a Home Office issue, but I will raise it with the Home Secretary and see what it is we can do to repair.
So Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will say this as gently as I can. I feel today, as a gay man, less safe than I did 3 years or 5 years ago. Why? Sometimes because of the rhetoric that is used, including by herself, in the public debate. I'm afraid we're not able to have a debate. Let's have a debate. I'll be very happy to debate. I'm just making that point, that many of us feel less safe today, and when people over there cheer, as they just did, it chills me to the bone. It genuinely does. So I ask her two very simple questions. First of all, how many people does she think today's decision will affect? Precise number. And secondly, she will know that there are lots of people in the UK who have entered into same-sex civil partnerships and marriages who would like those to be recognised in other countries around the world so that they can live their lives wherever that may be. What has she done since she's been in power to make sure that more countries recognise those same-sex civil partnerships and marriages?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will also speak very gently to the honourable gentleman. He says that my rhetoric chills him to the bone. I would be really keen to hear exactly what it is I have said in this statement or previously that is so chilling. But I would tell him what chilled me. In May 2021, against official advice, I will stress that officials said you should not have this meeting. I met a young lady called Kira Bell. She was a lesbian. She was a lesbian who told me the horrific experience that she had in the Tavistock clinic. It was an eye-opening experience. I know that the member for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath talked about transing away the gay in his speech in Westminster Hall debate. We are seeing, I would say, almost an epidemic of young gay children being told that they are trans and being put on a medical pathway for irreversible decisions, and they are regretting it. That is what I'm doing for young LGBT children. I am making sure that young people do not find themselves sterilized because they are being exploited by people who do not understand what these issues are. And I am saying this on the advice of clinicians, I'm saying this on the advice of academics. There are clinicians from the Tavistock who have been whistleblowing, talking about what these issues are. The honourable man tells me that he is traumatized. We are traumatized by what is happening to young children, and we are not going to run away from this issue any longer.
Colonel Trawadina.
Speaker, like millions of people across this country, including the LGB Alliance, I'm concerned by the erosion of hard-won rights of women and girls, not least the right to female-only spaces. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that we need a coherent policy across the whole of government, across every single department, to make sure that we are protecting female-only spaces and making that as a core commitment ahead of the next election?
I do agree, and I do agree that this has to be across the board in government, and some of this work is actually already underway. But I think it goes far beyond that. This cannot be a left or right issue. This cannot be an issue where certain people are personally invested in their own campaigns and cannot see the other point of view. This needs to be something that we work together on both sides of the House. But if I am giving a technical statement and explaining our thinking, and members across the House are talking about how they're traumatized, this is not serious policy making. We need to be able to have a proper conversation, take the heat out of the debate, and speak properly as members of Parliament representing all of our constituents.
Neil Handley.
Speaker, it really infuriates me to hear people in this chamber speak about the LGBT community as one homogenous group. We are not one homogenous group, and there are many LGBT anti-people who oppose self-ID for obvious reasons. One of the issues that I'm deeply concerned about is that many public bodies have not been observing their public sector equality duty properly, and in some cases they have been erasing sex from legislation which is out with that duty. What action can be taken to make sure that legislation is fit for purpose and it matches all of the protected characteristics contained in the Equality Act?
The Honourable Gentleman is quite right to raise this issue. This is why I mentioned the work we are doing around clarifying the difference between sex and gender. As I said, these terms were used interchangeably when we originally legislated in this House, and that is creating some confusion in terms of understanding. But public authorities should aim for clarity in what they are doing. I know that many organisations, hospitals in particular, think that removing the term women is more inclusive. It really isn't. It is excluding. And I would say to them gently that if you are using phrases like chest feeding or removing words like mother from paperwork, from forms, you are not helping. You are actually making things worse, and you are providing you're providing confusion. And I'm going to be working with public authorities. The Minister for Women is also a health minister. We take this issue very seriously, and we will see what more we can do in order to provide clarity. Providing clarity is the key point.
Okay. Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, women's participation in sport is significantly lower than men. And we need to encourage more girls and women to participate in sport because it's good for their long-term health as well as their mental well-being. But we do hear stories, and I've heard stories in my constituencies, of women and girls being put off sport by the presence of males for safety, privacy or fairness reasons. Can I ask the Secretary of State what she is doing to encourage girls to participate in sport and to protect the integrity, fairness and privacy within women's sport?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is something which I have said it's crucial sporting bodies understand. They are responsible for managing the rules in this space, and quite a lot of them have actually updated their guidance in order to reflect this, but not all of them. But young women in competitive sports shouldn't have to just silently accept that biological men will always beat them and take their chances to win gold. Generations of women before them have worked really hard to ensure that women have a place in sports, and those who excel get the reward for that and are recognised. So the Equality Act is not a barrier to fair sport for women. It permits it, and it even requires it. So I'll be working with my colleagues in DCMS. The Minister for Equality is also a DCMS minister, to ensure that fair sport is a right every woman and every girl can enjoy.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Secretary of State's commitment to evidence-based policy making and awaiting the outcome of the CAST review. She will be aware, like me, that the interim report of the CAST review stated that they'd heard from young lesbians who felt pressurised to identify as transgender male, and that's something that, as a lesbian, concerns me. But as well as evidence-based policy making, does she also think it's very important to be clear about what are and are not our obligations under international law? And does she agree with me that there's no international treaty to which the United Kingdom is a signatory, which requires us to have a system of self-identification. The current system we have is legally compliant and is compliant with the ECHR. And while some people talk about self-ID as best practice, that is no more than an expression of their opinion. And does she also recognise that self-identification raises very real issues, not just for the safety of women and girls, but also for their privacy and dignity, and also for the rights of same-sex attracted people to freely associate?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my learned friend is absolutely right. Self-ID is something that impacts all of the things she's mentioned. I think we actually speak less about freedom of association and the impact that it has there. And it goes to the point made by the Honourable Member for Kirkcaldy that we do need, in many respects, to separate sexual orientation from what we refer to now as gender identity, what is under the T. We have lumped them together before. That was helpful in many circumstances, but I've seen this issue arise in some of the other equalities work I've been doing around race, where we use the term BAME to lump lots of different groups of people together. And when that, when that occurred, we actually missed a lot of information about what was happening within those groups. We need as much granularity as possible if we are going to serve both people who are LGB and people who are T. She talks about what work we're doing in order to stop lesbians from being made to feel like they have to be trans-identified males. I've asked the Equality Hub to do some work with the Lesbian Project, who I know are very interested in fixing this problem. But on the point of international treaties, she is absolutely right. And so much of the criticism about how we will fall in international standing is not evidence-based policy. It is not a good lookism. This is not a good look, and we probably shouldn't do it. That is not how we should be making policy. We should be looking at the facts, thinking very clearly about the outcomes we want, and acting accordingly. And that is the way the Equality Hub, under my leadership, will continue to behave.
Nick Fletcher.
Speaker, the Secretary of State for Education said that today that to completely stop children from being able to socially transition at school will require change in equality law. Yet children who do socially transition can end up on a pathway to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and surgeries that leave them infertile, and which impact their bone and even their brain development. It's also tearing families apart up and down this country, and we cannot continue to let this happen within our schools. So I will be supporting my right honourable friend's bill this afternoon before she lays it in Parliament. But will my Secretary of State also meet with concerned colleagues across this House to change this law to protect our children at school, because this is a must?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I should say I'm very happy to meet with members across the House on this issue, but I will stress that changing the law is not going to be easy. It is not going to be straightforward. It will need consensus broadly from across the House because of many of the issues which I have alluded to earlier. But to his earlier point around social transitioning, I think he's actually right. And it's probably worth me putting on the record what social transitioning is, because I know a lot of people may not necessarily be clear about what I'm referring to. Social transitioning is a relatively new phenomenon. It is rooted in gender identity theory, which I must stress is a very contested ideology. The term is often used to refer to a range of actions that a child may take to appear more like the opposite sex, accompanied by an expectation that they will be treated as if they are. This may include requests for a child to change their name, pronouns associated with them, uniform, or use different facilities from those provided for their biological sex. Not all of these requests will comply with legal duties on schools, in particular to safeguard children. Social transitioning is not a neutral act, as it has been recognised that it can have formative effects on a child's future development, which is what he's alluding to when he's talking about cross-sex hormones. We are taking this very seriously. We will have the gender questioning guidance out very shortly, and I hope it will address many of the issues which he is concerned about.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Minister for her wisdom in her answers to all the questions here this morning. Will the Minister confirm that, similar to the fact that at 16 years old you can have a full driving licence in the United States of America, and yet you would not be able to apply for a full licence in the United Kingdom until our legal age is attained, and that this is the same premise in operation, and that our laws supersede other nations in this sovereign matter? In other words, Decisions are made here by our Minister and our government.
And not Stonewall.
Yeah.
I do think that we need to make sure that there is clarity across the board, that it is ministers in this country who are making those decisions very clearly and being held to account in Parliament as well. There are a lot of loopholes, I think, that have become apparent that allow people to change things through different means than via Parliament. Some of that is in changing the colloquial meaning of actually quite a lot of expressions. So bringing as much as possible into law to provide clarity, I think, will be really important.
So Conor Burns.
Could I invite my right honourable friend to agree with me that despite some of the rhetoric we've heard in the House today, the United Kingdom is an immeasurably better place to grow up as a gay person than it was in decades gone by, and that this House is at its best when it can find moderate consensus on what is right for our citizens. In that light, can I ask my right honourable friend if it is still the government's intention to bring forward conversion therapy ban legislation to this House? And if it is the case that the government intends to do that, will she give me and through me the House and the country an assurance that we will put often confused, vulnerable and frightened young people at the very heart of that, and that evidence-based decisions will inform the legislation the government brings forward?
I'm very, very happy to confirm that. And can I please thank my right honourable friend for the very measured tone in which he asked his question. It is a model, I think, for members on the other side of the House. There is so much that we have done, even under this specific government, even under my watch. A lot of the work that we've been doing around our HIV action plan, around trans healthcare. We've established 5 new community-based clinics for adults in the country. There is a lot that we are doing. So it is wrong to characterize us as not caring about LGBT people. It also sends the wrong signal to our international partners. If they feel that we are not doing well, it is not because of what we're doing, it is what members across the House are saying. But Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, the right honourable gentleman asked a question about conversion practices. Can I just give a little bit more clarity about what it is we are doing? This is a longer answer than normal, but I know that this is a matter of deep interest across this House, so I would like to address my thinking fully. A commitment was given to publish a draft conversion practices bill for pre-legislative scrutiny. I am determined to meet this promise, as I know is the Minister for Equalities. Attempts at so-called conversion therapy are abhorrent and are largely already illegal. So what a bill would do is identify this as a particular threat to gay people and confirm the illegality of harmful processes intended to change someone's sexuality. In that time, since this bill was first promised, this issue has developed. Now, the threat to many young gay people is not conversion relating to their sexuality, but conversion relating to gender identity. Girls like Kira Bell, who were rushed onto puberty blockers by the NHS and had a double mastectomy, now regret the irreversible damage done to them. I believe that this is a new form of conversion therapy. Respected clinicians, like those who left Tavistock, have made clear they are fearful of giving honest clinical advice to a child, because if they do not automatically affirm and medicalise a child's new gender, they will be labelled transphobic. So whatever bill we do needs to address many of those issues, and that is why we are going to publish a draft bill.
Stephen Doughty.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a shame that the Secretary of State isn't making a full statement on the issue of conversion therapy, because it's indeed a concern of many members on the opposite side, and we'd like some actual facts, which she hadn't provided up until now. She also hasn't provided, Madam Deputy Speaker, the actual statutory instrument referred to in this statement. I don't see it lying on the table, it's not in the Vote Office, and it's not online. So we're not actually able to scrutinise the names of the countries. So perhaps from the dispatch box, she could list the countries which are to be added or removed to the list. Perhaps she could clarify whether the United States and its member states is one of those, and whether or not she has received any diplomatic representations, indeed from the United States or any of the others whose status is due to be changed, opposing the decision which she's announced today.
Well Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I apologise to the honourable gentleman. As far as I was aware, I was told that the statutory instrument has been laid. So this is news to me. It should be that should have been the case. But all of the details that he has asked for will be provided in the SI. I'm not going to read out a long list of countries at the dispatch box, but I will say that I personally have not received anything from the United States. I haven't received any particular message from them, so I don't think that that is an issue.
Sir Simon Clarke.
Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my right honourable friend for a clear and cogent explanation of why the government is taking the action that it has. Does she agree with me that as we seek to address this very sensitive, important issue, it is very important that we avoid the kind of language which we heard from the honourable gentleman for the Rwanda, precisely because it obscures the fact that we are trying to work in the interest of vulnerable young people in finding a legislative way forward which protects their interest rather than sees them signposted, often prematurely, in a direction which is irreversibly harmful to them.
Secretary of State.
I completely agree with my right honourable friend. He said it far better than I could. Let's have the debate in this House rather than having people out there have the debate, which creates the climate of fear that many people are referring to. But the harder they make it for people to speak honestly in this chamber, the worse the situation will get. So I would urge members across the House to please listen to my right honourable friend for Middlesbrough. The point he makes is really important. We in this House need to set an example. Shouting and barracking and calling people bigot and transphobic is not what is going to help LGBT people in this country.
Dame Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if the Secretary of State would talk about the implications if sex was defined in law as biological for those existing trans people. Would they then have to, in all public appearances, act as if their biological sex was the thing that they had to do? So therefore you would have trans men having to use female toilets and trans women having to use male toilets unless they had a gender recognition certificate. I'm genuinely trying to find out what the implication of what she's announced without any papers before us to look at and ask are.
The Honourable Lady asks a very good question. And the way I would explain it is that this is not an issue that we had before. I wish we didn't have to make these changes. But the fact is, many trans people were living their lives peacefully and with dignity until others started exploiting the loopholes. It is not trans people that we are trying to limit. It is the predators who are using the loopholes and giving the trans community a bad name. So what we are trying to protect is the example I used before, male prisoners going into female prisons while claiming that they are the female. We need to continue to provide clarity because many public authorities are confused. They don't understand. People should use the toilets for their biological sex in the vast majority of cases. In some cases, that will be very difficult. But we need to provide more clarity so that predators do not exploit the loophole. That is what we're trying to do. As I said, in the vast majority of cases. But what we're trying to do is to protect vulnerable people.
Tom Hunt.
Speaker, it's the first time I've commented on this issue. Recently, this concept called the gender-bred person was found on a school intranet in Ipswich, and it promoted the idea that biology doesn't matter, it's always about what's in your head. It was complete self-identification. It also promoted outdated gender stereotypes. It had a list of hobbies and jobs associated with men and women. So presumably, if you like football, somebody might talk to you and say, well, actually, have you thought about actually being a boy, which is completely regressive. Does the Minister agree with me that there is no place for a gender-bred person in schools at all? And does she also agree with me that in primary schools we should be incredibly careful about promoting anything to do with gender ideology?
Secretary of
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend raises a very good point, and it is one of the things that I am seeking to resolve. Because we have not provided clarity in the law, a lot of the space has been filled by many dubious organisations producing very, very dubious materials with no basis in biology, in the law whatsoever, but they're pushing it because they think that they get away with it. I think we as a government have a responsibility to clear out this material from schools. I think the Secretary of State for Education is looking at the materials that are being taught under RSHE, but it is very important, I think the point he makes is very clear, that primary school children in particular need to be protected. That is why the guidance we're going to be putting out on gender questioning children is going to address this issue, except in the most extreme safeguarding cases, and I expect that to include clinical advice. You should not be socially transitioning any primary school children at all, or introducing them to this theory.
Leonici.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for coming here and making this statement, because my and my constituents' fear has been that there's been such aggressive activism with regard to this that actually it puts not only gay and lesbian people in real danger of hate crimes and different activism going on, but also to protect men, boys, women and girls, because my biggest fear in all of this is that actually we have self-identifying men in particular who will actually cause confusion for women who still do not have equality, especially with regard to health treatment and making sure that they are safe in single-sex spaces.
I think my honourable friend is quite right. We need to make sure that we are providing accurate data, and hospitals in particular, but loads of public authorities across the board know exactly who it is and what they are dealing with. We've seen examples, for instance, of people not receiving the right medical care because they were wrongly identified as the wrong sex because of possession of GRC or a self-declared difference in sex or gender. We need to make sure that that is not happening. We've seen issues across the board. The ONS is again looking at the census which it carried out to see what it can do to make things clearer, because it was quite obvious that many people who completed the census did not understand the question. And that is what we're trying to say, that this is a new space, a new area. Lots of things are developing. We should not be rushing to legislate. We should be legislating very carefully. That is why many of the things people have been expecting are taking time. We're waiting for the CAS review, but we will carry out this work.
Jonathan Lord.
A few years ago, a loving, caring, intelligent, thoughtful married couple came to me in my surgery, very distressed, because they just found out that their child had been questioning their gender at school, and the school for several months had not informed them. This child had been counselled by two adults who had no appropriate qualifications at all. As we seek clarity on the law and the guidelines here, can my right honourable friend reassure me that parents will be informed and included in those conversations, except in the most extraordinary circumstances?
I can confirm that. That is exactly one of the things that I wanted to make sure we saw in the guidance for gender questioning children. It is absurd for such a significant change to be taking place without parents knowing what is going on. Yes, of course, in the most extreme circumstances, that may not be possible, but the vast majority of parents love their children and care for them. We should not treat parents as the enemy here. They need to know what is going on, because quite a lot of the time, gender questioning children have comorbidities. Perhaps they are autistic, perhaps there is something else that is going on in the mental health space that needs clinical advice, rather than just put on the pathway for social transitioning.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for giving us this reassurance that this government remains committed to protecting women's rights, protecting children with policies that are based on biological reality and not extreme ideology conflating sex and gender. And does she agree that today's statement will help stop people finding loopholes around this?
Secretary of State.
Yes, I do agree. The purpose of this SI is to provide clarity. The law has not really been updated since 2011. We need to be more frequent in terms of making sure that we're keeping up with what is going on in this space. The SI, just in answer to earlier questions, the SI was laid at 12 p.m. I'm sorry that it is not ready. For members, but that is exactly what the legislation is intended to, and I do agree with my honourable friend.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As someone who spent their entire professional career working in state secondary schools as a teacher, the one place where debates around gender self-identification should never apply is with children. And just like the divisive critical race theory that we've seen enter our school, we're now seeing the equally divisive gender ideology too. So can the Secretary of State outline for my residents in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and talk that her announcement today will help to seek to clarify and make sure the classroom is a safe space for vulnerable young people?
I really welcome the intervention by my honourable friend. As a teacher, he knows how carefully we need to look after children and make sure that we are safeguarding across the board. That is quite right. This legislation, this SI, is just one step that we are taking in order to provide clarity. There will be more. There will be more coming. Not all of it will be legislative, but there will be measures brought to. There will be measures which will be bringing into place that will help people understand exactly what is going on. We should not assume that the knowledge that we have in this House is present in the population. I have met people who don't understand the difference between being gay or being trans. The Honourable Lady is complaining that my answers are long. It's because I want people to hear the truth and to understand what it is that we as a government are doing.
James Daly.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It seems that the main feature of countries that have come off this list is in their adoption of laws which remove all safeguards that exist around changing gender. Does my right honourable friend agree that this approach is dangerous, and what further steps is she taking to address its expansion?
I thank my honourable friend. I cannot control what it is that other countries do. All we can do is emphasise what our own policies are. We do have conversations with international counterparts across the House. There has been actually a lot of interest in what we are doing. I remember speaking, I won't name the country, a minister for another country who said that they had brought in self-ID early in theirs because they thought we were going to do it, and they were thinking again. There are actually countries internationally, even in Europe, who are taking steps to limit this because they're seeing the consequences and they don't think that the benefits outweigh the disbenefits. And I'm glad that we in the UK are setting a standard for evidence-based policy making and showing others how to get this right.
Point of order. Relating to this statement.
I will take the point of order relating to the statement because I think the Secretary of State might be able to clarify it. Point of order, Stephen Down.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And further to the point I raised in my question to the Secretary of State about the information that hadn't been provided to the House, I do have a list here which appears to be a list of countries and territories which are changing status as a result of the statement and the order that's being laid, but it doesn't appear to have been published or available in the Vote Office. And it includes a large number of Australian states, Canadian provinces, United States including Colorado, New Mexico, New York City, New York State, and other places, and actually a number of European countries, Malta, Mexico in Latin America, Luxembourg, many other locations. I just wondered if the Secretary of State could confirm for the House's interest whether that list is correct or not.
First of all, could I just say, I believe that the Secretary of State did confirm that the order has been laid and it should therefore be available in the Vote Office, but the Secretary of State might like to confirm that or to say that she might, if she does not have the information immediately available, that I'll be able to report it back. Secretary of State.
Speaker, I'd like to confirm that it has been laid. I've just heard from officials that it has been laid.
We will ensure that it is available in the Vote Office.
It was laid well before the statement to the House. I'm sorry it hasn't been published, but it was laid, so we have done our bit.
I think the Secretary of State has confirmed that it was laid. We will find out why it wasn't in the Vote Office and come back to the honour. Point of order. Shadow Leader of the House, Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if you have been given notice of any oral statement by the Home Secretary today, given he yesterday signed a treaty with Rwanda. As you are aware, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government has repeatedly made major announcements outside this House and has not been forthcoming in bringing these opportunities to members to scrutinise them here. I note that the Home Secretary was in fact in his place today for Prime Minister's questions, so would have been able to give an oral statement. And can you also confirm that statements can be made at any time during the day, and have you been given notice that one will be made later today?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order and for giving notice of it. As she knows, the Speaker has been very clear on the importance of ministers making statements first to this House. I can confirm that it is possible for a statement to be made at an unusual time, i.e. not straight after questions as would be the norm. The government would need to notify the Speaker of their wish to do so, and if that does happen later today, I'm sure that the whole House will be notified in good time. Thank you. Point of order, Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And on a point of order, I'd like to seek your advice, because on the 6th of December 1923, the first 3 female Labour members of Parliament were elected: Margaret Bonfield, Dorothy Jewson and Susan Lawrence. And these 3 women, Madam Deputy Speaker, campaigned tirelessly for election against all odds. And between 1929 and 1931, Margaret Bonfield became the UK's first woman cabinet minister after being named the Minister of Labour. That is a profoundly important anniversary in our country's history, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I seek your advice about how it can be marked on the record of this House?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her point of order and for giving me notice of it. All I can say is that I think the Honourable Lady has answered her own point of order in drawing our attention to this anniversary in the way that she has done. Order. Before I call the Right Honourable Member for Fareham to make her personal statement, I remind the House that such statements are heard in silence and without interruption. And if anybody feels that they can't abide by that, they are welcome to leave now. So I repeat that, in silence and without interruption. Personal statement, Suella Braverman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to make this statement, and I'd like to put on record my wishes to Mr. Speaker, and that he makes a speedy recovery. Madam Deputy Speaker, serving in Cabinet for just under 4 years has been a true honour, and I'm thankful for the opportunity and grateful to the many civil servants and ministers with whom I worked. We achieved a great deal in the last 12 months. Landmark legislation in the Public Order Act and the National Security Act. 20,000 new police officers, more than England and Wales have ever seen before. One of the largest ever pay rises for the police. Greater powers to dismiss rogue officers, and a review of the legal protections to empower our brave firearms officers. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to talk about the crisis on which I spent more time working than any other. Mass, uncontrolled, illegal immigration. We are all here familiar with the problem. Tens of thousands of mostly young men, many with values and social mores at odds with our own, pouring into our country day after day, month after month, year after year. Many come from safe countries. Many are not refugees, but are economic migrants. All have paid thousands of pounds to criminal gangs to break into Britain. All have come from a safe country, France, who, let's face it, should be doing so much more to stop them. This is putting unsustainable pressure on our public finances and our public services. It's straining community cohesion, jeopardising national security, and harming public safety. The British people all understand this, Madam Deputy Speaker. The question is, does the government? And will it now finally act to stop it? The Prime Minister, rightly, committed to doing whatever it takes to stop the boats. And he should be commended for dedicating more time and toil than any of his predecessors to this endeavour. And unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who would rather bury his head in the sand, he has actually advanced a plan. We made some progress during my tenure as Home Secretary. The overall crossings have fallen by 30%. The number of illegal Albanian arrivals down by 90%. And we were starting to close down asylum hotels. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, crossings are down is not the same as stopping the boats. And as Home Secretary, I consistently advocated for legislative measures that would have secured the delivery of our Rwanda partnership as soon as the bill became law. Last summer, following defeat in the Court of Appeal, I advised that we should scrap rather than continue passage of the Illegal Migration Act bill in favour of a more robust alternative that excluded international and human rights laws. When that was rejected, I urged that we needed to work up a credible Plan B in the event of a Supreme Court loss. Following defeat in the Supreme Court, the Prime Minister has finally agreed to introduce emergency legislation, and I welcome his decision. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is now 3 weeks on from that judgment, and we are yet to see a bill. I'm told its publication is imminent, but we are running out of time. This is an emergency, and we need to see the bill now. Madam Deputy Speaker, my deeper concern, however, relates to the substance of what may be in that bill. Previous attempts have failed because they did not address the root cause of the problem. Expansive human rights laws, flowing from the European Convention on Human Rights, replicated in Labour's Human Rights Act, are being interpreted elastically by courts, domestic and foreign, to literally prevent our Rwanda plan from getting off the ground. And this problem relates to so much more than just illegal arrivals. From my time as Home Secretary, I can say that the same human rights framework is producing insanities that the public would scarcely believe. Foreign terrorists we can't deport because of their human rights. Terrorists we have to let back in because of their human rights. Foreign rapists and paedophiles who should have been removed but are released back into the community only to reoffend. Yep, because of their human rights. Violent criminals pulled off deportation flights at the last minute thanks to the help of Labour MPs, free to wander the streets and commit further horrific crimes, including murder. Protesters let off the hook for tearing down statues and gluing themselves to roads. And our brave military veterans harassed through the courts some 40 years after their service. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is no secret that I support leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and replacing the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights that protects the vulnerable and our national security and finishes the job of Brexit by extricating us from the foreign court and restores real parliamentary supremacy. But I accept that the government won't do that and that it is a debate for another day. And crucially, when it comes to stopping the boats now, leaving the ECHR is not the only way to cut the Gordian knot. Emergency legislation would enable this only if it meets the following tests. Firstly, the bill must address the Supreme Court's concerns about the safety of Rwanda. Secondly, the bill must enable flights before the next election by blocking off all routes of challenge. The powers to detain and remove must be exercisable, notwithstanding the Human Rights Act, the European Convention on Human Rights, the Refugee Convention, and all other international law. Thirdly, the bill must remedy deficiencies in the Illegal Migration Act to ensure that removals can take place within days, rather than allowing individual claims and challenges which drag on for months. Fourth, the bill must enable the administrative detention of illegal arrivals until they are removed. And just as we rapidly built Nightingale hospitals to deal with COVID, so we must build Nightingale-style detention facilities to deliver the necessary capacity. Greece and Turkey have done so. Greece and Turkey have done so. And the only way to do this, as I advocated for in government, is with the support of the Ministry of Defence. Fifth, Parliament must be prepared to sit over Christmas to get this bill done. All of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, comes down to a simple question. Who governs Britain? Where does ultimate authority for the UK lie? Is it with the British people and their elected representatives? Or is it in the vague, shifting and unaccountable concept of international law? On Monday, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister announced measures that start to better reflect public frustration on legal migration. He can now follow that up with a bill that reflects public fury on illegal migration and actually stop the boats. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is now or never. The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce... The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce yet another bill destined to fail. Do we fight for sovereignty, or do we let our party die? Now, I may not have always found the right words in the past, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I refuse to sit by and allow us to fail. The trust that millions of people placed in us cannot be discarded as an inconvenient detail. If we summon the political courage to do what is truly necessary, difficult though it may be, to fight for the British people, we will regain their trust. And if the Prime Minister leads that fight, he has my total support. Thank you.
Thank the Right Honourable Lady for her personal statement, and we now move on to the presentation of bills. I will allow those who wish to leave to do so. As quickly and quietly as possible. Thank you. Thank you. Presentation of Bill, Julie Elliott.